What is up, Packers Nation? Welcome in to our happy hour episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Of course, you can find the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Very excited to be here today. A little bit earlier than usual. Sun's got a soccer tournament in the Fox Valley, so going to be heading there in just a moment, but wanted to definitely make sure that we had some time for the Q&A today and get to as many questions as we possibly could. Should be able to be here for about an hour or so, so make sure to get those questions in. We'll exhaust as many questions as we can over the course of that hour, and if we run out of questions, then we'll end early, but for now, should be a great conversation. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to it, and as always, thanks so much for being here. We will start with Chicken, who asked, who is your top favorite three UDFA of the LaFleur-Goody era? I'll go first. Chris Barnes, Tyler Goodson, Shannon Sullivan, and Tyler Lancaster. Well, this is a silly question. First of all, of course, number one on that list is going to be the one and only Tim Boyle. Love me some Tim Boyle as a undrafted free agent. I am loving me some Taylor Elgersma right now as well, so looking forward to that. Raven Green was somebody that I loved. Lindsey Pipkins had a little bit of a little stretch there. Who's the corner that Kabion Ento was another fun one for a couple seasons, but I would say Raven Green and Tim Boyle are the top two that come to mind. I think the third one's a little bit more debatable. Malik Keith's on that list, but those would definitely be my top two. Sub note, we really made the NFC Championship game in 2020 with Tyler Lancaster starting next to Kenny. Yeah, I think one of the things that you always have to recognize, and I think this is actually a really good lesson to everyone that's looking at that corner room right now or certain positions and be like, Green Bay's just not good enough. In 2020, when they had a real chance to win the Super Bowl, guys like Dean Lowry, Tyler Lancaster, amongst others, you go look at that roster, there was some real question marks on that team, and they still should have been arguably a Super Bowl winner, especially if Bakhtiari could have just stayed healthy. In 2010, Charlie Peppra is a complete, there's no disrespect to Charlie Pepper. He's a Super Bowl champion as a starter. It's about as mid of a starting safety as you can possibly have. You had a outside linebacker in Frank Zombo. That was nothing to write home about. Hell, Howard Green is a mid-season pickup that, is just a 300+ pound run stuffer, gets a pressure in the Super Bowl that leads to a Nick Collins pick six. And we can go on offense. The running backs, you had a running back room that was basically non-existent on that Super Bowl run. So you're not going to have these perfect lineups. There are things that you're going to have to overcome. And of course, the Packers that year ended up with like 20 some players on injured reserve as well. And yet somehow they won a Super Bowl. There are very few perfect teams in the history of the NFL where you just look at it and be like, yep, they've got everything that they need. And there's going to be some spots where you just need players like Charlie Peppra and Frank Zombo just to step up and give you everything that they can and let some of the other players do the heavy lifting. And I think it's just a great reminder that you might look at some of these positions, and I think there's very few of them, to be honest, on the Packers roster, but you might look at a couple players where you're not as high on them as maybe other people are and say, I don't know if we can win with that. Well, just remember, Frank Zombo, Charlie Peppra were two starters on that Super Bowl team. And in 2020, again, same thing, NFC championship game team with certainly some holes on it as well, and had every right to go and win that game and potentially win a Super Bowl as well. During your time watching the Packers, what was your favorite season? No Super Bowl years. That's too easy. My favorite was the 21 year where there was a good amount of good and bad drama and some fun players filling in. Is it 2008? I think it is. Nope, it was definitely not 2008. That was 6 and 10. What was the it was, just making sure I have my season right here. It was the 2007 Packers. So I was a year off. So as far as last year, 2007, when they went 13-3 and unfortunately lost to the Giants in the NFC Championship game on the interception by Corey Webster. That was a year they were 8-8 the year before. Mike McCarthy was, still, kind of installing everything that he wanted to install in that team. Favre was having kind of his last hurrah, which ended up being his last hurrah as the Packers quarterback, but he was making that one last run, and out of nowhere, they go 13-3. And I mean, an insanely fun 13-3 season. They played fantastic. They played a really fun brand of offense. And on top of that, like even one of those losses was like a game that didn't even matter against Chicago, where the winds were like 1 billion miles per hour and you couldn't throw the ball. So even that one you take with a grain of salt to some extent. So you just kind of threw that one out. The rest of the season, they're 13-2. You beat the Seahawks in that unbelievably fun snowball game. And then you're against the Giants. You get the Giants. You don't have to go against Dallas. The Giants upset Dallas, and you're thinking, this is unbelievable. We get the game at home. We don't have to go to Dallas, and we're going to get the opportunity to beat a team we already beat this year, to go to the Super Bowl and face New England. It was all set up perfect, and then it wasn't. And it was such a crushing, devastating ending, as we are very used to as Green Bay Packers fans. But leading up until that point, I mean, there was not a season that has ever come close to the enjoyment that I had of that particular year. A fun amount in-season pickups like Jalen Smith and Whitney Merciless. The special teams, looking back on it, was heartbreaking yet hilarious. Some tight, hard-fought wins. Saw Jordan Love for the first time, etc. Totally, it was a very fun season. Don't question about it. Up until, again, it was not. And let me say first that I hope this doesn't happen, but if the Green Bay falls short again in the playoffs and it was at the hands of mainly the cornerback room, what does that mean for Goot going forward, if anything? Nothing. Means absolutely nothing. If they make the playoffs or just, again, are a game short, if they're a game short, it'll be disappointing, no question about it. I will be stunned if it's due to the corner room. If it's due to the cornerback room, it'll be due to injuries. It's never just one room or one player or one situation, right? And in fact, as we're going into this right now, I still have more concern about the pass rush than I do with the cornerback room. I've had the opportunity to watch every snap of Nate Hobbs from this past season. And just let me say, make sure, I think that episode's going to air on Monday. Make sure you're checking that one out. You're going to want to listen to that one. This defensive back room, specifically the starters, Nixon, Hobbs, and Valentine, I think are a lot better than people are giving them credit for. And I would be against it. Could it be the weakest link on the team? Sure. Does that necessarily mean that is going to be the reason that they are not good enough? Or no, I would be very, very stunned if that were the case. Even if it does end up being the case, if they are a 10-7 team, the secondary doesn't perform as expected, and they get eliminated in the first round of the playoffs because they're playing the Vikings or the Eagles, and Devontae Smith and AJ Brown or Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison tear it up. Yeah, you're going to have to go back and reevaluate, and it's going to be disappointing. And I guarantee probably you, John, there's no disrespect to you, but you and a lot of other people are going to say, look, I told you so, right? But I think this secondary is better, especially if you include the safeties in it, than people are giving it credit for. And it is not anywhere near the concern that I have right now overall on the team. If you get injuries, yes, I do have questions about the depth. It is a fair concern to question the depth right now. If you talk to most teams about where their 4th, 5th, 6th corners are at, most teams have concerns about the depth at that spot. So it's not an excuse. It's not to say it's perfect. It's not to say that they couldn't improve it, but I'm more than happy in general with where it's at right now going into camp. I think you have 3 legitimate starters. I think you have Javon Bullard, who can pop down into that slot role to give you kind of like a pseudo 4th player. And I think training camp and preseason is the perfect place for players like Kamal Haddon, Kalen King, and Micah Robinson to prove themselves, to show that they can be a 4th, 5th, 6th corner, whatever that might be, to give you that opportunity. Going back to the lesson we just talked about, 2010 season, going into that year, you have a major question at cornerback. Yes, you have Charles Woodson. Yes, you have Tramon Williams going into that year that you felt very good about, clearly with Woodson, but both of those guys to some real extent. You had no idea who Pat Lee was in the conversation for that other corner. Jared Bush, you had no idea. And it looked like it was going to be a real problem at that spot. And an undrafted free agent corner, Sam Shields, stepped up and said, don't worry, I got this. It was awesome at that other starting spot. I'm not expecting that to happen, but you have to give those young players an opportunity to go and show themselves and see if you have something there. And Micah Robinson, Kalen King, and Kamal Haddon will have that opportunity. And just like we saw with them going after Malik Willis or picking up a Rasul Douglas in season in the past, or, other training camp additions that they've made, Cedric Benson, I think, being one of those in the past. Like, if they feel like they get to a point where, hey, Haddon and King and Robinson aren't taking that step, none of the other guys are, we feel good with our starters, but the depth just looks terrible. My guess is they'll make some sort of transaction, whether it be claiming a player off of waivers or making a trade for a 7th round pick or something like that to, bounce or, buoy up that cornerback room a little bit. But going into camp, I don't have any real issues with where they're at right now. So no, I don't think it would change anything. Even if they lost, 50-3 in that playoff game, I don't think it's going to change anything with Goody or Matt whatsoever. Would it potentially amp up the urgency and maybe a little bit more heat on their plate or heat on their seat, I should say, for 2026. Sure. I think that could be the case. I think it would take something beyond catastrophic for either Goody or LaFleur to be on the hot seat this upcoming year. And I think we're talking like 4 wins or less. I think anything outside of that, I expect both of those people to be back, unless there's like a huge falling out of some way, or like clearly like LaFleur just lost the team. Like they started 4-1 or 4-0 and then won one game the rest of the year and went like 1-13 with like a 12-game losing streak at the end or something. Yeah, if those things happen, sure, there's always different versions of that. But I'll just say this. I don't think any of us should be hoping for anything like that. And I don't think we should be expecting anything like that. This is a really good team. This is a very talented team. This is a very deep team. And even with some injuries here or there, this should be a team that's competing for a playoff spot at least. So yeah, outside of something catastrophic happening, do not see either of those people being on the hot seat whatsoever. Thank you, Andy, for the great breakdown of Mecole Hardman. Tell us why he is better signing than Sammy Watkins was. Well, they didn't give him as much money. I know Sammy didn't get a ton, but they didn't give him as much money. Actually, that might not be true. What was Sammy's contract in Green Bay? It wasn't much, I know. Sammy signed for... Oh, it's only like 1.85 million with only 350K guarantee. So it's actually a very similar contract. Yeah, so it was only like 400,000 more with similar guarantees. So it's actually a very similar deal. All right, I take that part of it back. So it was a little bit less than Watkins. Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess my answer in a roundabout way, Mirko, is I'm not necessarily here to tell you that it's a better signing. I think you should look at both of them as a pretty much vet minimum sort of free agent signing that has the ability to fit within the roster of what you're trying to do. And it's a play where you might need the guy, you might not. With Watkins at a couple games, and then it didn't really work out. They moved on from him as they tried to get younger at the position. It was the right move. I don't think Hardman's guaranteed a roster spot going into the season either. So I think Hardman's in a good spot. I think the difference between Watkins and Hardman is Hardman gives you something on teams where Watkins certainly did not at all. I also think that Hardman's in a position where he still has his legs, where Watkins really did not to the extent that he did earlier in his career at that point. So I think those things are a little bit more advantageous for Hardman, but both of them are players that are going to have to continue to earn their spot all throughout the year. If you get to a point where, Hardman doesn't make sense, or Christian Watson comes back and you need to open a roster spot, it could easily still be Hardman that's on the way out, even if he makes the 53. But they're both vet, pretty much vet minimum, low price free agent signings with some upside, but very little risk. And I think that's kind of how you should treat it. Like I said, there's no guarantee that Hardman makes this roster, and he's going to certainly have to battle for it. Ben says, I think it's different in that Sammy was kind of signed closer to being him player to take the wide receiver core over the top, which never happened. I see Hardman more as an interesting mixed piece. See, I kind of looked at both of them as more of like an interesting mixed piece. And again, Watkins got a pretty small contract as well. So I don't necessarily see it that different. Although, again, I do think Watkins was set up to be more of a player in that wide receiver room than maybe Mecole Hardman was. Didn't end well, but I really enjoyed the season where we weren't going to make the playoffs. Roger said relax, and then we won out regular season at least. Yeah, that was a good one too. Am I crazy, or is Malik Willis's contribution last season overlooked? Yes, he handed the ball off a lot, but when we called on him to throw, his passes were excellent. Love the channel. Thanks, Andy. I think for the most part, it is appropriately valued. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of people understand that the Packers would not have been a playoff team or even in a position to, I think, be in the playoffs at the end of last year had it not been for Malik Willis. I mean, those wins against Tennessee and Indianapolis, not to mention the Jacksonville game as well on his own personal AFC South revenge tour. If those don't happen, Green Bay's not in the playoffs at the end of the year. So I think everyone recognizes the job that he did, especially in weeks 2 and 3, being the starter when he had just got there a couple weeks earlier. I think everyone kind of understands what sort of effort that took from not only Malik Willis, but also from Matt LaFleur and the offensive coaching staff to put that together. I think the game plan and the scheme was phenomenal for Malik Willis. They put him in an unbelievable position to go out and succeed, but that is only half the battle. The stuff that they were running with Malik, right? And it's not like they did a ton of this stuff beforehand and he just got there. I mean, the spinners here, like you still have to know everything to know of like where to fake, where to go with the ball, when you're spinning, when you're turning, whether like So much of that stuff. Plus, there was some read concepts in there. There was stuff he did with his legs. There was stuff he did as a passer. They did not put a ton on his plate as a thrower, but when they did, he responded to it and responded to it very well. So I thought it was one of the best game plans that I've seen in the NFL in those first couple weeks, the Colts and Titans game, and then even what they did with them in Jacksonville as well. I thought the running game that they put in for that game was dynamic and beautiful, but they also put stuff on Malik's plate that he was able to digest, and digest he did, and he was fantastic. So I think there's a subset of fans that think that means Malik Willis is in the conversation of Jordan Love category, and that some even have that Malik should be. They are not. They are nowhere near the same caliber of quarterback, okay? And if anyone has the opportunity to go watch and practice or just see some of this stuff, it's not close. Jordan is by far and away the better quarterback. But was Malik awesome in the opportunity that he was given? Do I think he deserves an opportunity next year to go out and, whether it be a stopgap quarterback or just compete with another quarterback or whatever that might be in some other team? Absolutely. Would I love him back as a backup for the foreseeable future? No question about it. So we'll see how that progresses. But I think most people recognize that A, what he did was pretty brilliant, and B, that it not been for that, Green Bay's not in the playoffs. So I think both of those things are recognized, but certainly worth noting as well. I am ready for the heat wave, Mike. We've got a big soccer tournament this weekend, so we'll be out there later today, then tomorrow, and then hopefully 2 games on Sunday if we make the championship game in that situation. So looking forward to that, but one step at a time, and it's definitely going to be hot out there. A lot of hydration breaks for the kids, hopefully. Been off the grid for a month. Besides Jair's released, what have I missed? Bo Melton's at corner. Bo Melton is practicing at both wide receiver and at corner. Taylor Elgersma tore the world up and threw 2 consecutive touchdown passes on 7-on-7s. What else do we have? I know, we had Ed Policy meeting with the Packers media for the first time. The Packers are moving out of Green Bay. I think that's pretty much about it. Other than that, Kevin, not a ton going on. And this is the next month is a decent one to take your Packers stuff off the grid, but of course not with Pack-A-Day. Still start with Pack-A-Day every morning for an hour, get your Packers fix, and then go off the grid after that. We didn't sign Sullivan as a UDFA, though. That is correct. Didn't he play for the Eagles for a bit, and then we signed him? Yes, he was not a UDFA directly for Green Bay. You are correct in that, Ben. Going to my first training camp next month. Are you doing a Love Q&A or a meetup? Live, I'm assuming you mean. It is my plan to do one. I probably need to start planning that since we're almost a month away now. I'll definitely put something together, hopefully over the course of the next couple weeks. It might be last minute, to be honest, because next week's going to be crazy with me trying to get a bunch of episodes done before I leave for Spain. Then I'm going to be gone for Spain for a week. And then when I come back, it's going to be a lot of catch up. So it may be last minute, but I will try to plan something eventually here. No update on Jenkins' situation whatsoever. That's probably going to drag into training camp, unfortunately, but hopefully they can get something done sooner rather than later. I just went through that. Pale Shelter. What's your reasoning in terms of keeping 4 running backs on the roster over an extra safety? Wouldn't someone like Brooks likely make it to the practice squad without getting poached? I think you are playing a little bit with fire with Brooks and with Wilson potentially getting poached somewhere else. If you feel like you could keep those players on the 53, get one of them in the practice squad, you could definitely try that. No question about it. I wouldn't necessarily view it as keeping it over a safety. I felt good about the safety room, even if Zane's not there. I would like to keep Zane. I think you could go down to 9 offensive linemen, and you can probably get enough guys back that you feel comfortable there as well. You could easily go 6 wide receivers. There's a variety of different ways that you could go to still get Zane on the roster. And like I said, I love Zane. I would like him on the roster. I think from a special team standpoint, he makes sense. But I wouldn't necessarily just view it as Chris Brooks or Emmanuel Wilson versus Zane or anything like that. There's going to be a lot of moving parts to it. But I think the thing that I would look at first and foremost is I like all 4 of the running backs, and I like them all, what they bring to the table. And I think they're all a little bit different. I think kind of as I explained it on that episode, Jacobs is your guy. Marshawn Lloyd is your change of pace. Brooks is your do everything. And Wilson is your Jacobs insurance. So what I mean by that is if Jacobs goes down, neither Marshawn Lloyd nor Chris Brooks are guys that you want to give, 15, 18 carries to. They don't, that's not the type of running back that they are. Emmanuel Wilson can handle that load. You can give him as many, runs as you need to kind of be that true power running back. And then you still have Marshawn Lloyd as the change of pace and Chris Brooks as your do everything back. So I think that Lloyd, Brooks, and Jacobs all have legitimate roles within the team. And I do think Emmanuel Wilson is just very talented. And again, gives you a little bit more of that Josh Jacobs insurance if Jacobs would go down for any period of time. So I like all four of them. Is it possible that you could release one and try to get them back in the practice squad? In that case, it would clearly either be Brooks or Wilson, sure. But I think Brooks, with what he showed last year in Green Bay, I mean, he was a good runner. Plus, he gives you everything else: teams, pass blocking, run blocking, catching the ball out of the backfield. Teams love those type of backs. I think you would be really at risk of losing him. And I think Wilson's good enough to be on a team's 53 as well. So yeah, it's just one of those, how much of a chance do you want to take with it? And I just ultimately think that all four of those guys can help you at running back this year, which is why I came to that conclusion. But you could certainly get to the point of only keeping three. And then it's a very fun battle between Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks. And hopefully whatever one you cut is able to get back in the practice squad. If the Packers go like 4-13 or 5-12 without a Jordan Love injury, are LaFleur and Good on the hot seat? Yeah. I mean, and again, barring like injuries everywhere else or something like that, but it's not going to happen. Like, that's not the type of season that I think I would be stunned. I would be stunned if they had that type of year. I think they're just way too talented and have too much depth. They'll catch enough teams on the right day. Lambeau's a good enough home field advantage. Like, they'll end up with like 7 at least. And I think something catastrophic without a Love injury is extremely unlikely. But if it does happen, I don't think either of them get canned again unless like LaFleur completely loses the locker room or something insane happens. But I do think both of them would be on the hot seat going into their final year, and they might have to go through lame duck seasons. But again, I don't know why we're wishing anyone on the hot seat. They've both been very good at their job so far. What did Ed Policy just say? Like, exceptional at their jobs. Matt LaFleur is at worst top 10 coach in the league, and I think he's closer to top 5 than he is in the top 10. And I think Goody is a top 10 GM in the league. I just say very, very aggressively, be careful what you wish for. These are two people that bring stability and a common vision to the organization and are continuing to put the Packers in positions to be successful. And they just got to the playoffs in back-to-back years with the youngest team making a transition from a Hall of Fame quarterback. And we're in that position because Goody had the foresight to go get a quarterback before he needed one. Any idea that you want these two guys gone at the moment seems patently absurd to me at the moment. And yes, they need to. Goody said it. Goody didn't shy away from it. It's time to start winning championships. I wholeheartedly agree. And you would need to be, at your best come playoff time. Green Bay was not this past year, but we're 2 years away from a team that out of nowhere was competing with San Francisco after crushing Dallas in the playoffs and having a real chance to go to the NFC Championship game, and probably should have had it not been for an Anders Carlson missed field goal and some missed plays at the end of that game. So I think they unfortunately hit a rough patch at just the wrong time this past year. That's not to shy away from the fact that when they did face good teams, they struggled. But I do think that there's a very good team here. And again, I think trying to wish away, and I'm not saying that this is what you're doing, Joey, but trying to wish away or hope that there's a bad season so that they move on from LaFleur or Goody, I think is just absolutely insane. And I think both of them are very good at their jobs. I don't know with what Brooks has shown the last couple of years. I bet he gets claimed by somebody. I just think there's a chance. And it just comes down to, are you willing to take that chance or not? And I just think it comes more down to of like, do you want to keep those players on your roster because they're good football players? And I think that's where I'm at a little bit more. Even if I thought there was a chance that maybe you could get, if I knew I could get them, one of them back, sure. Then you can for sure get them back in the practice squad and keep somebody else. But without knowing that, I just think all four of them are good enough where you don't need to subject any of them to waivers. And I think all four of them can help your team this upcoming season. You convinced me as far as it goes, going after Ramsey if he hits free agency. Again, I think some people maybe didn't get to the end and were thinking that you have to trade some big pick or give him over 20 mil per year. It has to be the right set of conditions. And those conditions that exist are he gets released, he's a free agent, you can get him on a 1-year deal, You can get him reasonably priced, like under, 16 million-ish on a 1-year deal. And then, which I don't think is absurd when Jair just got 4 years plus $2 million guaranteed. I get there's a playing time difference, but I don't think a 30-year-old corner on a 1-year, $14 million deal is that absurd for Jalen Ramsey. And then he'd have to be willing to play in Green Bay as well. And if those conditions are all met, he gets released. It's a 1-year deal. He's open to Green Bay. Green Bay's open to him, and they can get him on a reasonable contract. I'm all in. If any of those things do not come to fruition, I'm probably not all in. But in the right scenario, I would love for him to be in this defense, and I think he'd perform at a very high level. What could make sense, send one of the receivers that may not make the roster to the Colts for Corey Ballantyne. Joey, I've talked about this as well. I'm actually talked about it with Paul Brettel on the side, because Paul, if you don't know, covers the Colts as well. I said I could see come cut down time, the Colts added a couple other corners as well. Ballantyne doesn't look anywhere near like a lock to make the team. I could see like a, McCole Hardman or a Malik Heath or something like that, Bo Melton swapped for a Corey Ballantyne, and then you're able to add Ballantyne back into the mix as a special teams player and somebody that gives you a little bit more depth at the position. Or he could just end up waived as well, and Green Bay picks him up off of waivers. But that is a name absolutely I would keep an eye on. Is there any big run stuffers that the Packers could target that doesn't have to be a big move? But I was looking for, there's maybe another message there, Tommy. There is not. The defensive tackle market is picked over. The free agent market is completely saturated and done and gone. They've all signed. And we saw how important that teams utilized the draft at defensive tackle as well. Those guys flew off the board also. So nope, you are looking at your defensive tackle room the way that it is right now, and barring a trade somehow, which again, don't know that you're going to find it because teams have really valued these defensive tackles this offseason. There is nobody out there at defensive tackle that really makes any sense for Green Bay at this point in time. Last year, we were 10th in pass defense and the team that played the 5th most zone. I expect that to increase this season. Which one? 10th in pass defense or 5th most team playing zone? I think 5th is about right. Maybe they play a little bit more, but I don't think you want to get too predictable either. I do think you still want to mix in some man-to-man concepts here and there, just if nothing else is a change of pace. So I would like to see them stay right around 5th, quite frankly, and hopefully they do move up from 10th to, let's just say, 1st. Take that 0 out of it, put them at 1st in pass defense. But listen, anything in the top 10 will be very exciting still, and hopefully they can add a few more sacks and just even perform better against some of the better offenses. Looking back at the coaching hire cycle in 2019, seeing some of the names they interviewed before hiring LaFleur is interesting. Caldwell, Pagano, Philbin, McDaniels, Brian Flores. You're missing a big one. Dan Campbell was on that list. So Dan Campbell and Brian Flores, two of the more interesting ones for sure. But yeah, there were some stinkers on that list, but there were certainly some ones that would have been very interesting. And Dan Campbell certainly one on that list. Brian Flores, another that would have been intriguing to see how they would have fit in Green Bay. Oh, you nailed it. I didn't realize you had another one. Dan Campbell, Pete Carmichael, Todd Monken, and Adam Gaze. Yeah. It probably would have been LaFleur, Dan Campbell, or Flores or bust. I don't think any of those other ones would have been good hires, but they got a great one in Matt LaFleur. If LVN and Luke Musgrave reach or even approach their ceilings, it could be transformative for the team this year. Absolutely. But we could say that for a lot of teams with a lot of different players, and their ceilings are insanely high. And, the odds of that happening, I think, are insanely slim. I'm just looking for good seasons from both. If LVN can get to a point where he's a legit starting defensive end with real pressure ability, that's going to be a huge win for Green Bay. And if Musgrave can just stay healthy and be a legitimately really good number 2 tight end, that's going to be a huge win for Green Bay. So I think all of these things are interesting to talk about, but I think them reaching their ceilings is probably pretty slim at this point, or the odds of it happening at least. Say we theoretically could lose half in the next offseason. Which teams do you think you'd go to? Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with that, Ben. You're going to have teams that replace their head coaches first and foremost. So I'd have to kind of look at each coaching situation individually to see what coaches could even, get fired, so to speak. So yeah, there's nothing that comes to mind off the top of my head, but I'll just say this. There's going to be probably 6, 7, 8 openings, as there is almost every single year. And if the Packers defense performs even remotely well this year, I'm talking anything even in the top 12, I think any team that doesn't interview Jeff Hafley at least interview. I'm not saying hire, but interview Jeff Hafley is making a mistake, would be my statement. So I don't really care what team is open to it or what head coaching jobs become available. If there's an open head coaching job and they don't interview Jeff Hafley, I think they're making a pretty dumb mistake by doing that. He's going to be a good head coach, I think, in this league. Bold prediction is that Jordan is the MVP. I think he'll be in the conversation. If he wins the MVP, that'd be amazing. I think he finishes in like the top 6 or 7 and is like legitimately in the conversation at some points during the year. But I think he'll be in that conversation in some capacity. Hypothetical: the Packers win the Super Bowl if they win their final game of the year. No, I don't know. Like, if Jordan is an MVP, they'll have an opportunity. If they finish with the top defense in the league, they'll have that opportunity. If their young players reach their ceilings, they'll have that opportunity. I don't think there's any one perfect formula, right? But they have a lot of things that could hit that, if they do, are going to give them a real puncher's chance to win a Super Bowl. But they need some of their young stars to step up. I think that's probably the easiest answer is guys like Edgerrin Cooper, guys like Evan Williams, Jordan Love, somebody at wide receiver, Luke Musgrave, LVN. Some of these guys just have to step up in a pretty significant way, and you need to see some stars be born this upcoming season. Aaron Rodgers signed with Pittsburgh. That also happened in the last month. Why is center undervalued compared to the guard position? I was always told they are the quarterbacks of the offensive line. Is it because they are twice as many guards, so agents are pushing their salaries harder? I don't think so. If you watch offensive line play pretty consistently, if you're getting a 4-man rush, okay, this isn't always the case, but if you're getting a 4-man rush, you've got your 2 defensive ends, your 2 defensive tackles, and your ends are matched up against the tackles. Your tackles are usually matched up against your guard. And a lot of time, the center has the ability to be kind of an extra player that goes in double teams players. Now, we're seeing more and more teams use 5-man lines or line up a player like Green Bay used to do with Zadarius Smith right over center. So if you don't have guys that can go out and, block at a high level from a pass rush standpoint, they're attacking those centers. So I think that gap is becoming a little bit different, but a lot of times you're 3-on-2 in the interior of the offensive line, and your centers usually being able to be used as somebody who can go and double team. Same thing in the run game. Yes, sometimes you get a player right over you, but a lot of run game concepts involve the double team with the center in some real way as well. So I think there's a less one-on-one responsibility as a center than there are at the other positions, whereas the other positions are definitely going to be getting more one-on-ones through the course of the game. And then I do think your point about being the quarterback of the offensive line and making those checks and everything like that are really important. But a lot of guys can do that at the position as well. I mean, you can go get a Lucas Patrick, who isn't a great center at this point in time, but he can make all the checks and calls for you. So a lot of guys can do that. I think it'll continue to evolve into a position that does continue to get paid more and more. I think it's harder and harder to have any weak point along your offensive line, but I think that's why you're seeing the tackles and guards go for a little bit more than what the centers are currently going for. Brian Gutekunst is the man. Again, not infallible, not perfect. There's things I think he can improve upon, and certainly his first-round picks is a great thing that he needs to, or a great example of something that he needs to do a much better job of. But again, I think Green Bay is overall in very good hands right now with their overall structure of Russ Ball, Matt LaFleur, and Brian Gutekunst. Not doubting LaFleur and Gut, they've both been great, but I was just curious with Policy coming in, if they had a disaster year in Policy's first year, I do not want them gone. And yeah, I just want to clarify, Joey, I was not putting those words in your mouth, or at least not trying to. So sorry if it came across that way. But yeah, I mean, I think anytime you have new leadership, there's always, eyes looking around being like, all right, what is this guy going to want to do to make his own imprint on things? I think everything that's been done, Policy's been around for. I think he's seen everything. I think it's probably less to do with LaFleur and Goody at the moment and Russ Ball, but I think he'll be hands-on. I think he'll, look if there's any cracks in the foundation, and if he recognizes anything, we'll try to improve it. But I think he would try to improve that with Goody and LaFleur and Ball, rather than looking to make some sort of big splash outside move. But every year's a big year. To me, it has less to do with that Policy coming on, and just that if you're winning in this league, you're going to get a lot of leeway. And as soon as you have losing seasons, there's going to be a huge spotlight on you. And that's going to come from the fan base. That's going to come internally. The NFL is a pressure-packed steam cooker where you better be ready at any given time to deal with adversity. And if you're not winning football games, you bet everyone's on the hot seat. All the players, all the coaches, all the GMs, everyone. It is nonstop. you are constantly looking over your shoulder. You are constantly feeling the heat of that. And especially in Green Bay, like there is a desire to win a Super Bowl pretty much every single year, and they have to deal with that. So it is less to me to do with Ed Policy coming on and more to do with just the expectations of the position in Green Bay and in this league in general. If you're not winning, you're putting yourself on the hot seat, period. End of story. And certainly that's the case in Green Bay. So less to do with policy, more to do with just the pressure that comes with being an NFL coach and an NFL general manager. Anyone else thoroughly amused by media's overreaction to Policy's comments? Like, tell me you don't know Packers football without telling me you don't know Packers football. It was funny because the takeaways, of course, were, they're going to move the team or everyone's on the hot seat. The takeaways that you should have taken from Ed Policy are all positives. What I mean by that is he stated he does not want to dabble and meddle, I should say, with the front office, with the salary cap stuff, or with the coaching. You don't want Ed Policy sitting in on Matt LaFleur's game planning. You don't want him sitting in on the draft being like, I think we should take Shedeur Sanders here. You don't want him getting involved in the salary cap situations of like, I think it's a bad idea to give this guy a signing bonus. Let's sign him to a base salary. And you want him far away from all those conversations. So I think that's important. And I think that's a huge thing that we learned first and foremost. I think one of the things that you always want him to focus on, because where breakdowns do happen, is if there's a lack of communication between the powers that be, being Russ Ball, Brian Gutekunst, and Matt LaFleur. You want those things functioning cohesively. He said he's going to open up the lines of communication even more, get more involved to make sure that those lines of communication are and remain open, and making sure that the communication between all parties is fantastic, which is what, again, you want to hear. You also hear, and for those of you who do want to hold, everyone accountable and hold people's feet to the fire and the flames and have them in the hot seat or whatever, he said, my job is to keep everyone accountable. If they're not doing the job to the best of their ability, it's my job to make sure that they are held accountable for that. He said the accountability thing almost verbatim. So to me, everything that I wanted to hear from Ed Policy, not to mention the three key tenets of what is his guiding principles. I hope that it's winning, keeping the team in Green Bay, and strengthening the bond in the community. There's nothing that's more important than any of those three things. Making it so that the Packers continue to win at a very high level and hopefully are bringing home championships, that they are staying the Green Bay Packers, and that they remain viable in the community and are somebody that is a leader within this community. They are Green Bay. The Packers are the city of Green Bay. Like, it is, they're not just the guiding light. It's everything that this entire community is based upon. So those are three of the best principles that you could possibly have coming out of his mouth. Everything that he said made sense. Everything that he said was perfect. I don't know that there could have been anything that he almost said any differently that I would have wanted to hear any differently. So yeah, I loved it. And I think everyone should be very pleased with what they heard from the key takeaways from that entire interview that they did. So I'm very, very happy to hear everything that he said from that. And I think Packers fans should be as well. Well, the Packers go 3-3 in the NFC North Division. Last year it was 1-5. They will go 3-3. I could see them almost going 3-3 verbatim, but I think 3-3 or 4-2 is what they'll end in the division. I think it's a really fun division. I could see Detroit coming back a little bit. I think some of the losses on the offensive line are really going to affect them, as well as Ben Johnson and as well as Aaron Glenn. I think the Bears have so much invested into Caleb Williams, and what he can do is going to make or break them as a franchise for the foreseeable future, and make or break Ben Johnson's term in Chicago. And JJ McCarthy is going to be a really interesting case study in Minnesota as well. I think this is a very fun, very unique, very challenging, but a division that you can go 5-1 if you play well, and you can go 1-5 if you do not play well. And I think anything in between is on the table as well. But I'll say they at least go 3-3 this year, James. Some fans are on hard drugs. I figured it out. You know what? I think fans are very passionate, and I love that. It certainly helps me in my job. And I think that the passion being there for this team is a great thing in general and overall. And that passion comes through in very different ways for very different people. And never want to tell anybody out a fan, but I think sometimes the takes can get into the ridiculous category. That is no different than any other professional franchise in all of sports, or even with a lot of youth franchises from my experience as well. So I love that the passion is there. Sometimes I think it can be a little bit misguided, but I would rather it be passionate than indifferent or apathetic. And yeah, it's a good thing more often than not. But again, sometimes it can be a little bit misguided. Andy Herman, Packer Guru. Sure, why not? Can you please give us a projection on our defensive line this year? I'm kind of worried, but I don't know if I should be. Daryl, I think this is a huge question for this upcoming season. And I don't think we're going to have an answer until the season starts. I don't think there's anything we can learn in training camp because, quite frankly, the defensive line looked awesome in training camp this past year. So it's going to take this defensive line going out and performing at a high level for, I think, a lot of people to gain a level of trust in it. I think there are answers there. If you're a glass half full sort of person, DeMarcus Covington coming in and LVN along with Kenny Clark being healthy after two, I think, injuries that really affected them this past year, there are signs of optimism there. I think what Jeff Lee learned on how to get to the quarterback with four, while maybe not necessarily just bringing his front four, I think is going to carry over into this upcoming season as well. And I think there are legitimate answers there with Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, LVN, amongst others, that you can get to the point of having a very good defensive front. But there are question marks, no question about it. And I think they're going to have to navigate that and get to the point where they are a top 10 pass rush team, like a legitimate one, not just we got 12 sacks versus Will Levis good. Like we're legitimately good week in and week out and consistent with it. And if they get there, I think this defense has the ability to be really, really good. And if they can't, I think it's just going to be something that handcuffs them for the remainder of the season. So I think it's one of the biggest questions that remains on the team. And hopefully they have great answers to it. And hopefully we see a pass rush that is much improved in 2025. The team offers a fourth for Romeo. Would you do it? Ooh, that is like right on the Mendoza line. My gut reaction is no. I think that's right around the point where you would have to consider it. It would be totally, to me, up to where the rest of the wide receiver room is at. If Matthew Golden looks legit, like he's ready to fire out the gate as a legitimate, really good starting receiver, if Wicks looks really good, if Jaden Reed looks really good, if everyone's healthy, if Watson looks like he's going to come back around week 9 or 10 and be ready to like be legitimate Christian Watson, not like 50% Christian Watson, but he's trending in the right direction. And then you get either a Savion Williams or McCole Hardman or one of these other receivers that look like they're ready to help out in a legitimate way as well. I would consider it. My answer would probably be, I want to keep him on the team. I think the third round pick is where I would have to say yes again if things are a little bit more in that everything's looking great at the wide receiver position. Fourth is close, but I just want the depth. Because you get to a point really quick, right? If you trade Romeo for a fourth round pick, great. I've got a fourth round pick next year, and I was just able to acquire a fourth round pick for a receiver who I was only going to play for one more year on a pretty stacked wide receiver room. I think you can make an argument for that. Christian Watson's out injured. Your top four are in some capacity probably Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Matthew Golden, and Savion Williams. Two of those players are rookies. Your next group up, Hardman, Melton, and Heath, you're not expecting like big time wide receiver play from. Can they be your number 5 or number 6 wide receivers? Absolutely. But you're not expecting them to have like breakout seasons. So you're down to 4. And Savion Williams is probably more in that developmental wide receiver category. So you're now down to Golden, Wicks, and Reed, which by the way, you're very small with that trio as well. You don't have your possession guy. So now you're really hoping that Christian Watson can come back and be that guy right away, even if he comes back week 9 and he looks amazing. Christian's had other injury issues as well. Even if he comes back from this one, you can't necessarily count on him that he won't get a different one. I just think that you get a lot thinner than you would like very quick by trading away one of those players. It's not impossible. I would consider it. I would think about it. I would talk about it, but my gut would be for a fourth round pick, I would probably just keep Romeo in that situation. Hesitantly optimistic at improvements, but also cautious. I think we're talking maybe defensive line there, Ben, but either way, that's probably a good way to look at the season overall. Left center and right center lines at County Stadium were both 392. I don't know where that came from, Andrew, but I'm assuming you mean the right there. There we go. 392. So I think we did talk about this in the past. I do think we figured out it was Milwaukee County Stadium. Halfley to the Bengals to fix their defense. Their offense would have to be pretty bad if they were going to go and fire their coach. I think they'll be good enough where they don't fire Zach Taylor, but hey, if they do, Halfley would be a good fit there. I also don't know that I want him to go to Cincinnati. That's a tough place with the ownership group there, but could fit. And hope Halfley would only leave us to take a head coaching job. Yeah, for sure. He's not taking another defensive coordinator job. I wouldn't entirely rule out, by the way, him being somewhat interested in another head coaching job in college. I don't think that would be the case, but there have been enough changes where now some teams are hiring general managers for their team that take care of all that other stuff that he didn't want to do anymore, and he just wanted to coach. So if he did find the right situation in college where he could actually just be the coach and a general manager would take on all that other stuff, maybe he would consider that, but I think it would take an NFL head coaching job for him to leave. With the city of Green Bay and the Packers organization having negotiations, how long do they have to come up with a new deal? There's no deadline here on anything. The lease that they have in place is, and I think this is Green Bay, the city of Green Bay's big argument is the lease is out for a while yet. So there's no like deadline on anything here, which I think is actually more of a problem than anything else. Cause I think the Packers want to make changes to it. And Green Bay's like, we're in this really long lease right now that we don't want to change. We have no incentive to do anything. So I think that's actually kind of part of the problem, but there's no deadline on anything at the moment. Over under 34.5 touchdowns for Jordan. I think in general, you're probably better off taking the under on these just because injuries can happen and you never quite know. But I think there's a really strong chance that he can hit the over on that this upcoming season. Can all the fire Goody people please stop? I've seen so many people saying that. Yeah, again, everyone has a different take. And that's what the beauty of this thing is in having these conversations. And it's what drives everyone to want to get and consume more Packers content, right? Is we all want to fantasy book this thing. We all want to, Monday morning quarterback it. We all want to be the general manager. And we all think that we have a great idea on how that should be done. And I don't, like I said earlier, I don't think Goody is perfect. I think the first round draft picks are a great example of that. And I think that there are things that he and LaFleur need to do better if they do want to be, at that podium holding a Super Bowl trophy together. But I think both of them are doing very good at their jobs overall. I don't think there's anything that would lend you to the idea that either should be fired or that you would want them fired at this point in time. And I'll just add on top of this as well. If you are on the fire Goody, fire LaFleur train, just know that your wavelength for firing coaches and GMs moving forward is insanely thin because there's nothing. Like they just made back-to-back playoffs with the youngest team in the league. They've made the playoffs almost every single year, barring one, pretty chaotic year with Aaron as in his last year as quarterback. They've made the playoffs every year. They've put together Super Bowl winning caliber teams, especially in 20 and 2021. And, I know things didn't fall their way, but this has been a very successful franchise in both Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst's tenure in Green Bay. I get it's about championships, but outside of not winning a Super Bowl, there is nothing that you can point to say either of these people deserve to be on the hot seat. And my point being there is if this is your thin line of like, well, they didn't win a Super Bowl, fire them, you're going to end up with that thin line over and over and over. Meaning if the next coach and GM don't win it within 3 or 4 years, you want them gone too? It's a terrible way to run an organization. You're going to end up with one of these franchises that's cycling through coaches and cycling through GMs because they're not winning Super Bowls. That's a rough look. That's a rough scene. And what you're going to end up with is fewer and fewer top GMs and top coaches wanting to go to your organization because you're going to pull the trigger right away and say, oh, you didn't win a Super Bowl. Sorry, you're out of here, even if they've been very successful. So I don't think that is the type of franchise that you want to run. And I think you have to be very careful with that precedent as well. If there is legitimate reason, and like I said, if they go 4 wins this year, I don't think they get fired unless, again, Matt loses the team in the locker room in some real way. They'll be on the hot seat and probably deservedly so. That's just how the NFL works. But I think being over aggressive and being like, get these guys out of here. I know I just said like, hey, I appreciate everyone's fandom and I appreciate that there's a passion for it. Let me just say, and this is something I believe wholeheartedly, as soon as something goes wrong, the low-hanging fruit of cut that player, trade that player, fire that coach, fire that GM is the lowest hanging fruit and the dumbest common denominator of sports fandom. It's lazy. It is. I'm not saying that at some point, Joe Barry, that was the opposite. I think they took a year too long with Joe Barry. I understand that. I get it. And that does happen from time to time. But as soon as there's any sign of adversity, the immediate reaction online every single time is fire everyone, cut everyone, trade everyone. It's sophomoric, and it's just, I get it's passion speaking, and I get maybe a few too many, spotted cows speaking at the time as well, but it's not good formula. It's not good process. And you have to be able to overcome some adversity, and you have to give players, coaches, and general managers leeway and opportunities to make mistakes and have bad days so that they can overcome it and, erase some of those issues. I remember clear as day, people thought I had passionate conversations with friends about Mike McCarthy. And I said wholeheartedly, Mike McCarthy is going to get you to a Super Bowl someday. Whether or not he won it, we'll see. But I was very passionate about it. I very much believed it. Same thing with Ted. I believed in his vision for the team. And they got there. A lot of people did not think that Ted or Mike, even that early on, were going to be the coach and the GM that were going to be able to get you to that spot. And they did. They won it. Should they have won more? Whatever. We can make that argument. But they were really good in Green Bay for a long period of time. It is time for Goody and Matt to get up on that podium. I agree with that. But to immediately have that visceral, immediate reaction anytime something doesn't go quite the way that we want, because we didn't get the corner that we wanted in free agency, or didn't make that big splashy trade, or, lost in a game that you should have won, or whatever. There's a time and a place for it. More often than not, that should be your last resort. It shouldn't be your gut reaction is, let's get rid of everyone. Let's trade everyone. It doesn't work. It just really doesn't work. Look at any franchise that is doing that. Most people, by the way, in Philly this past year, wanted their head coach, wanted Sirianni gone before the start of 2024, based on what happened at the end of 2023. If most Philly fans would have had their way, Sirianni would have been gone before they had their Super Bowl season. Just, again, there's adversity that you have to go through. These things are not perfect. And if they were, it wouldn't even be any fun anyway. If the Packers, I wouldn't mind a couple years if the Packers wanted to go just undefeated for the next 2 seasons and win everything and, get 2 Super Bowls back to back with no adversity whatsoever. Sure. But at some point, I don't know, year 4, year 5, year 8, year 10, it might get pretty old after a while. Like, some adversity is not the worst thing in the world. So enjoy the ride, enjoy the process, and just know that it's never going to be perfect. And you're going to have to go through some ebbs and flows through the course of this thing. And that's, again, kind of what makes it fun. The journey is usually better than the end. And I do think that there's going to have to come some of that. Now, if over the next 2 seasons, the Packers win like 10 games or something, yeah, it's see you later. You're probably going to have to go in a different direction at GM and at head coach. Your formula didn't work, and Green Bay's going to have to reevaluate that. And they probably would. But at this point in time, it's way, way ahead of that curve. And I don't think that we should even be having conversations about it at the moment. Who will be the training camp preseason or darling? Taylor Elgersma, of course. That's a great question. It's probably going to be, some running back that tears it up, or some wide receiver out of nowhere. Maybe, I don't know. I bet Luke Musgrave has a really great training camp, would be my guess. I think he's trending in that direction. I could see him getting a lot of flowers this upcoming camp, to say the least. I bet Malik Willis has a really good camp too. That would not, stun me. I bet he has a really good preseason. Let's see, who else? Just trying to think of like different positions. I could see Javon Bullard having a really good offseason. I'll go Bullard, Musgrave, and Malik Willis. I'm going to go with those 3. Bart Starr played at number 81 versus the Colts 5 times at County Stadium. I think that seals it. Yeah, I think, again, we did figure out it was at County Stadium. Maybe bugging, but I feel like that for Green Bay to be able to sniff a Super Bowl, LaFleur needs to improve a bit as a play caller. It's not talked about as much as the players, but his decision-making is iffy at times. I think the thing that's interesting about this is people will talk about Matt LaFleur being too passionate or too out of control. Nick Sirianni is probably the most passionate, out of control head coach in the entire NFL. Just won a Super Bowl. I will say it before, or I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I want my coach passionate. I want him going to bat for his players. I want every once in a while a angry challenge flag. I love that he has that. He wants to win so freaking bad. And I think more often than not, that's a good quality than a bad quality. Can he get it in check every once in a while? Sure. Do I think it's something catastrophic? Absolutely not. And like I said, I would rather have him have that passion and have his players and teams back and want to win that bad than the alternative. So I actually think the play calling in general is good. I do think that Matt gets ahead of himself sometimes and game plans himself into a corner. What I mean by that is I think sometimes Matt is so focused on what the other team does poorly and trying to take advantage of what the other team does poorly, he forgets what his team does well. And I think what would be, in general, a good rule of thumb for Matt is go into the game setting the tone based on what you do well. Run your stuff. All right. Have some arrows in your quiver. Is that the right word? Arrows in your quiver. That you know how to exploit the other team when you need to. Maybe a key third down. Maybe you need a big play in the game. Have some of those plays at your disposal that you know you can go to, that you have schemed up and can use against them in those moments. But start by dictating on your terms what your team does well. I do think that is a fair argument with Matt at times, where he gets so focused on, I need to take advantage of this thing that they do poorly, that again, he forgets what his team does well. And I think that is something that he can do a little bit of a better job on. But I think he knows how to game plan a game very well. I think he knows how to put together a game plan that is going to work off of itself. Again, something that you do early in the game is going to be something that looks a little bit different later on in the game, and it's going to exploit something that you have a tendency on. I think those are things that he does very, very well. But I think he can focus a little bit more on his own team's strengths. The Canadian Cannon. I still like Air Canada from Aaron Nagler a little bit for Farrell Gersma so far, but I'm open to interpretations. The Packers move to San Antonio and become the Armadillos. Would you change the name of the podcast, or what would you do in that scenario? I know you're joking. She said, Joey, I'd have to reevaluate a lot of things if that were to be the case. Hopefully I am well retired by the point where we even have to have those conversations, but or it just never happens, more likely. But yeah, we'd have to figure out something in that situation. Don't know what. I don't know if I have a good plan words for armadillo, but yeah, we'd have to figure out something. Aaron and Corey interviewing Goody on Cheesehead TV always cracks me up. They're so goofy, and he's a pretty serious guy, but he does a good job of playing along. I love it. I love that he gives that access to Packers fans. I think Aaron and Corey do a great job with it. And I think they do a great job of asking some pointed questions while also making it fun and giving Goody the ability to kind of maneuver around it where he can give an answer, but it doesn't have to be super serious either. I think that's a good balance to have in that situation. So I love it. I enjoy it. I think they do a great job with it. And I think Cheesehead TV being able to get Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst from time to time speaks to them and their brand and the great work that they do, but also speaks to Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst and having a pulse and saying, hey, this is more than just doing a press conference every now and again, or doing some, like, they're also keeping it local a little bit with doing that and keeping it on a side of things where the fans are very passionate. And I love that. And I think it's really, really cool, and hope that it continues for the foreseeable future. All right, I have to get to probably have to go lightning round through just the rest of these, so I'll try to get to as much as I can. Andy, hope you're doing well. As a peer play caller, where would you rank LaFleur? Yeah, that's probably not a great start for a lightning round. I'd have to go through kind of one by one. I think he's in the top 10 for sure, no question about it. Probably 5 or 6, somewhere in that range would be my guess. Random things to be excited about: jet sweeps, orbit motions with a healthy Marshawn Lloyd and Jaden Reed behind. Better run blocking line that can give those guys more runway to play with. The run game with some more physical components along the line, specifically moving on from Josh Myers and adding Aaron Banks in there, is something that has me very, very excited. Do you get to interact with leadership front office much? What is the vibe with Ed policy? Are you feeling good with that choice? I do not. Other than, again, press conferences with Matt and Brian, that's my only access to that. I don't have any real feel for how things are looking behind the scenes or anything like that. And unfortunately, with Ed policy, I joked when they hired him, we have no all 22 of the front office. So, or just like the leadership group. He could be amazing. He could be terrible. I have no idea. You have no idea. I don't think anyone has any idea, but I know that they took their time. And I think the last thing that Mark Murphy wants is for his lasting impression to be the guy that he hired to be a failure. So I'm sure he put a ton of time, effort, and energy into that hire. Everything I've heard so far has been going glowingly for Policy, and I'm very bullish on it. But your guess is as good as mine. We have no way of really evaluating that until we actually see what he does in the position. Any next time you make chicken breasts, put McCormick's hamburger seasoning on it. All right. I will do my best to adhere to that. I wouldn't do it for Romeo. I'll get an elite corner for him. You will not get an elite corner for Romeo Doubs at all. Unless you just happen to have you make that Fred Vinson for Amon Green type of trade where you happen to be ahead of it, or you get Al Harris in a trade or something like that. And you have the wherewithal to get somebody that's on the up and up, and you can kind of rob a team of it. Romeo's got value. He does not have top elite corner value. That's for sure. We went over that. 1-for-1 player trades are rare, and one good will give up an elite corner for Romeo. I would agree with that. I'll go again, more random things. I think Jordan will prioritize the safe passes more this year, adding more balance to the passing game, which opens up the deep field for a technician like Golden. Could easily be the case. I just think they're going to be much more balanced on offense. And from a passing standpoint, I think Jordan's going to be healthier. I think they're going to be in a better rhythm. I think the receivers and quarterback will be able to practice together more. I think that'll all have a cumulative, I can't say that word lately, effect on the offense in a very good way. Not in lightning round, Grant, but in general, it's an advanced analytic that takes your opponent into consideration, as well as a lot of other smaller factors to kind of give you an idea of what the best offense, defense, and special teams and what the worst offense, defense, and special teams are. You can get a pretty easy definition of it just by Googling what is DVOA, if I'm being honest, but in lightning round here, it would probably take me a little bit longer than that. Green Bay has the best offense and wins the Super Bowl if staying healthy, and Jordan throws over 34 touchdowns and Jacobs rushes for 16 plus touchdowns. Sign me the hell up, Ben. Strongly dislike Goody, but he doesn't deserve to be fired. I don't even know why you strongly dislike Goody. I think he's a very likable gentleman that does a really good job overall. So I don't know why, but sure, go for it. But again, I think overall they're doing a good job in Green Bay with the front office and the coaching in general. It is low-hanging fruit calling for firing when something goes bad. Both of the last 2 years, people called for Love to be benched when he struggled. So dumb. Devontae Adams would have been cut pretty fast. Fire Mick LaFleur-Arthy. Fair enough. But yes, it's never going to change. I don't know. Probably never need to get on my soapbox about it because it's never going to change anything anyway. But I just wish people would have a different concept of it, because in general, it's a ridiculous thing to say. And it's like a clock. Every once in a while, you're going to get it right. And yes, there was a time and a place to fire Dom Capers and Joe Barry and Mike Pettin, and those things came. And the Joe Barry one probably should have come a year sooner. Some of the special teams coordinators, same things, but more often than not, it's better to spend your energy cheering them on and hoping that they make the necessary adjustments than just calling for everyone to be fired as soon as one thing goes wrong. The famous line about Ray Rhodes, he's lost the team, sign of that for, I'm not exactly sure what you mean here, Andrew, but yes, if you lose the team, then there's no usually coming back from that. Thanks for everything. Are we to get drunk, Andy, before or after vacation? Definitely not before. I have way too much to get done, but it definitely is still on my to-do list. I was talking to somebody, I don't think people recognize just how much that goes into this, and like how every waking moment of mine is dedicated to stuff. So I don't have a ton of opportunity just to be like, yep, let's get drunk on cam tonight, but I do want to do it, and it will definitely happen at some point. I've loved this team for close to 35 years. I want very badly for their tired and true formula to get them past the first or second round. No Super Bowl appearances since 2010 is a thing for me at this point, and it should be a thing for you at this point, R.R. Smith. I do think that for the most part, it is unacceptable that this team with these quarterbacks that since, I'm going to go further, since 1998, they have been to one Super Bowl. We are approaching 30 years with one Super Bowl appearance. On average, you should win, if you think about it logically, one every 32 Super Bowls, right? That's how many teams there are. On average, your clock should come around one every 32 years. You should attend a Super Bowl, then on average, once every 16 years. They have attended one in the last almost 30 years. That is unacceptable, especially when you consider you have Favre, Rodgers, and Love. We'll see what happens with Love, but Favre, Rodgers, and Love for that entire time period. One Super Bowl attempt is not good enough. Nobody is apologizing for that Super Bowl attempt. Nobody is apologizing for that Super Bowl win. Tell the Chicago Bears, the Minnesota Vikings, the Detroit Lions what that one Super Bowl win would have meant to them in that period of time. But it is fair to say that that in and of itself is not good enough. I understand that. I get that. You should want more. You should be craving more. No question about it. They have to start winning. It's a fine line. I get it, because this has been a successful franchise through that entire time frame with lots of opportunities and bites at the apple to go out and win. Should have won in 14, should have won in 20, should have had the opportunity in 2021. And just some things, some bad luck, some injuries, some Bakhtiari stuff, like doesn't go your way. An onside kick, a Brandon Bostic moment, Brett Favre, dumb interception to Corey Webster. We can go on and on. 4th and 26. There's been a lot of them. They were right there on so many occasions, but one Super Bowl appearance since 1998 is not good enough. So I hear you. I feel you. But I also think that you, in order to fire somebody to go in a different direction, has to be a bit more than we didn't win a Super Bowl or we didn't get to a Super Bowl. So I'm with you. I think you should be demanding more. And I think that is a thing. And I'm right in that same bracket. And I called it out this week, by the way. I hate this idea from Brian Gutekunst that he doesn't believe in championship windows or windows opening. I think that's a ridiculous statement. I really, really do. I think if you look in the NBA, in Major League Baseball, in the NFL, in any professional sport, there are absolutely championship windows, and you better strike when you have one, and you better not try to go too aggressive when you don't have one, because those things will set you up for failure. So I do think that that is a very concerning statement for me personally, because I just believe wholeheartedly in the opposite. I understand what he's saying. I just disagree with it. So I do think that there are things there that I would point to that I would say I do have some concern, but I do think they are also doing a very good job of building this team the way that they see it in their vision. And I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, because I know that my way is not perfect either. And there is no perfect formula. So let's see what they do. They have not given, I don't think, anyone a reason to be fired as of yet. And I think they have given everyone the benefit of the doubt to say their vision is working for the most part, but we need to see that Super Bowl win. Hopefully that's coming, and I'm willing to give them that chance until they prove otherwise. But I do think it's a fair lens to look through things through. And I am with you. I would like to see another Super Bowl opportunity coming up in the near future. Everybody forgets there aren't that many championship tier personnel out there, and there's a real chance of downgrading the replacement. That's well said, Nora. My friend was calling for McCarthy to be fired right before or right after the Super Bowl win. I thought he should have been fired after 2014. Collapse was unacceptable. Yeah, I would not put that, because they literally coached Brandon Bostic to not do that, and there were some other things. I think the players on the field dictated that one a little bit more than the coaches. I think there was a plethora of really poor moments on the field, not necessarily off the field. The fake field goal was one that was unacceptable, but I understand the sentiment at the same time. Wanting to fire Tomlin, for example, is wild. It's also, this is where there's thin lines on this stuff. I do think people can get stale. I do think that Mike Tomlin might be a little stale in Pittsburgh at some point. I don't know if it's there yet, but I think it could happen. I think Mike McCarthy, when they fired him, was stale in Green Bay. I thought he was still a really good coach. I think he had some good years in Dallas. I think when they fired him in Green Bay, it was time to go in a different direction. I think it did get stale, and I think they needed to do that. And I think it was the right time in the right place, the right moment. So that you have to be cognizant of all of those things. Even Belichick at the end, I think, got stale in New England. The greatest NFL coach, arguably of all time, got stale at the end of his tenure in the Patriots, and you had to go in a different direction. I think those are sometimes tough conversations to have. So how I would view that one, Nora, is I think Mike Tomlin is a NFL coach all day, every day. He's clearly one of the top 32 coaches. He's clearly probably one of the top 10 coaches without a doubt. But I think there can come a time and a place where you've been at a place so long, things just get maybe a little bit stale or a little bit set in place, and you have to make that change. So I think those are interesting conversations, but I do think, no question, Mike Tomlin is still, to me, a top 10 coach in the league. NBA fires championship coaches within 3 years now. It's not necessarily a good thing, Mike McGee. Sometimes it can be. Sometimes it might not be. I think Bud at the end there in Milwaukee, that's another great example. Coach Bud, I think, got stale. I think they were right to go in a different direction. But you better hit that new head coaching hire, or you're going to end up in a situation where you get not even a few months into your coaching hire and you're already firing the guy that you hired, and you then are in a situation with Doc Rivers now that's not advantageous. They completely biffed the post firing of Coach Bud. Do I think the firing of Bud was the right decision? Yes. Do I think they completely screwed up the aftermath of that? Unequivocally. So these are very tough decisions. Even if you get the firing right, if you fail on the aftermath of it, you could end up in a way, way, way worse situation. So again, be careful what you wish for. I wonder what they think they're accomplishing with that. You meaning the firings? I don't know. Love LaFleur's passion, and I like seeing the anger, but he definitely throws way too many challenge flags out of pure frustration when there's almost nothing to challenge. I think he just needs to wait a beat in some of those moments. If he's getting the heads up from upstairs to challenge it, then he needs to figure that out, right? If like they need to give him better info, but he needs to wait till he gets that confirmation from upstairs. Now, sometimes if like the team's about to run a play and you have to make a quick decision, so be it. But more often than not, wait till you hear from the people above on whether or not you should challenge it or not. Go Pack Go. Go Pack Go. Enjoy the weekend. Go Pack Go. Have a good day, Andy. Appreciate you guys. I don't know if it's safe passes is the right word for that. I love Jordan's deep stuff when it works. If anything, probably just good decision-making will put Jordan in good company. I think that's well said, Ben. What's cute is when fans of teams that only have a couple playoff wins in 30 years throw shade at the Pack for only being at one Super Bowl. Yes, you have to be not tone deaf in that situation. Again, very thankful for that one Super Bowl and that Super Bowl win, but I do think that you should want more than that one appearance since 1998. Hell yeah, go Packers. I think San Francisco pretending they're still in championship window is pretty funny, but we'll see. I think it's closed, but I get that it's a tough thing to recognize that it's closed and to, pack everything up. Also, they hit on a 7th round quarterback, which makes things different. Like I think they're probably a bit in no man's land. I think they have a chance to maybe pry it open just a little bit one more time. But if things start going bad earlier this season, I think they need to recognize that it's time to sell off and go in a different direction. Highway robbery, what the Ravens got Jair for? Depends. If they get him for 4 games, doesn't look like much of a steal. They get him for 8, looks pretty good. They get him for 16 or 17, absolute steal. But it's all going to be dependent upon how much Jair plays. And that's the whole situation that it's been in from day one, is that you just have no idea. On average, it's 8 games. You're going to get eight games out of them. You probably pay about $5 million in that situation for 8 games. It's a fair price. Just depends on how he plays in those 8 games. What 8 games is it? If you miss him for all the playoffs and all the end of the season stuff when it matters most, maybe not worth the $5 million that you paid him. Just depends on how much he plays. Well said, Ben. Packers should have won like 4 Super Bowls with Favre and Rodgers. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. I'm sure the Colts would have liked more with Peyton Manning. Brady is the one, of course, that breaks the mold on everything. I'm sure the Bills would love one with Josh Allen right now. I'm sure they would just love that one. Bills fans are already, I think, questioning if they'll even get that one with Josh Allen. Josh Allen's one of the best quarterbacks of the last 25, 30, 40 years, in my opinion. I'm sure the Dolphins would have loved the one with Dan Marino. Sure, and we can go on and on. It's not, I'm sure you get the point. It's not an easy thing to do. And Brady broke the mold, and I know Mahomes is on pace as well, but it's a very, very, very difficult thing to do in the NFL. No question about it. Might have missed it. Where's the vacation? Tenerife in the islands there. I can never remember the name of the islands. Yeah, I don't know why I can never remember that. But then Madrid right after that. So Spain in its entirety, but Tenerife first and then over to Madrid. And you may not read this, but that's okay. But thank you so much for everything you do. You, Justice, and Negler are the best. I watch every day. Sheboygan, Heebs, thank you so much. Really appreciate that a ton and appreciate the kind words. I am losing my voice, so I need to get out of here because I got a lot of podcasts to record over the course of the next week and a half. If you are members, you're about to get bombarded probably early to mid next week, probably mid next week with a bunch of episodes in advance. Great time to sign up to become a member. But yeah, you're going to get about a week's worth of advanced episodes next week as well. So keep an eye out for that. Appreciate all of you for being here. We will do a happy hour still next week and a members only Q&A next week. And then the following week I will be off, but I will have episodes for you guys all week in advance. So you can look forward to that as well. See you guys all very soon. Thank you again for being here. Appreciate all of your support, but until next time. And as always, go Pack Go.